don't know if it's that I like that song or if it's just because we're not getting hit with copyright infringement notices anymore that makes me like the song.
It's like you've conditioned your brain based on lack of punishment to like it.
Yes. Yes. So here is something I wanted to share with you, and I don't know if you've ever. And anytime I'm about to share something, Brad always gets nervous and worried, but don't worry, he doesn't have to.
For
Like,
good reason. Your track record is not stellar.
actually, the last couple times it's been fine, but I wanted to play this for you in case you've never seen it. I don't think you have. You watching? Here we go.
I'm always watching.
Trade you this for your cupcake. What? It was just carpet fresh. I'm on your side.
I've been observing your behavior, and I don't think you're an addict. I think you're an idiot.
Well, I don't pay you to think, Hot Lips. In fact, I don't pay you at all. Count it.
I'll be keeping my eye on you. What's your name?
My name? P. T. Griffin. Yeah, Peter Griffin. Oh, crap.
What did we just watch? See, this is why you should never be in control of anything related to this show ever again.
How do you not find that funny? He's trying to think of a alternative name and ends up coming up with Peter Griffin, his actual name. How is that not funny? How is that not funny?
0% fun. That was 0% funny.
Whatever. You are such a Debbie Downer. I think it's hilarious. So you're not. Whatever. You don't count. Before we get started, I do have a question for you. Where do you think we're at on the Kardashev scale?
Like 0.5? 0.5?
Yeah, I was going to say the estimates right now are 0. The best estimates put us 0.73 to 0.74.
Yeah,
like,
so
it's just wildly like. How are
I'm
we
so
ever
glad that instead of starting this very important episode with like things that are relevant to the point, we just went so far off field that the 4 listeners we had have now left.
Actually, no, we're up to 7 listeners. So, see, people like this kind of stuff.
Well, we could be at 14, but instead, Dylan had to start with a Family Guy quote and a question about Kardashev civilizations. So with that, let's get into the show.
Fine. All right, fine. Whatever. People like this kind of stuff. You'll see. This is going to be a good episode because it's a popular one. In fact, GLP-1s, that episode that we did, it happened to be our highest viewed episode. And I thought not only is it something people are interested in, but it's something that over time these medications evolve. It's not the first time. Like, these GLP-1s aren't the first products to ever hit the market. So, but things evolve, right? And so I thought, given that it's been probably almost a year now since we've talked about it, it made sense to revisit the topic. There's still a lot of public interest. There's, like I said, there's rapid evolution in this medicine and the research involved, and then people have more questions about it too. So, and I think we're already getting some questions, but I think it's a good opportunity for people to ask questions in the chat as we're going along. So anyone listening, anything you want to know about the GLP-1s, Mounjaro, Ozempic, you name it, fire away, or anything that you just want to share. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a question. Put it in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer. So let's go with it. Let's start with a refresher. GLP-1s, let's define what they are and what they do. Brad, that's your area of expertise, so fire away.
I mean, these medications they have 2 primary effects. One is they have glucose regulation effects. Primarily, they stimulate the pancreas to release insulin. So they're sort of like insulin secretages in some case. Like, we've had medications in the past that have done things similar to that, like sulfonylureas, but these are a little bit different. They also suppress your liver from pushing glucose out into the bloodstream. And so they originally were developed to lower blood sugar amongst people with type 2 diabetes, right? That was their primary work or effect. What they found is when they started to use these medications at higher and higher dosages amongst people with diabetes, so they're originally just used for glucose control and then cardiovascular outcomes and renal outcomes, they found that weight loss occurred in the arms with the higher doses of the medications. And so with some additional work, they realized, oh, these are actually working in the brain to reduce appetite, which is causing people to eat less, which is also helping lower their blood sugar because as you lose body weight, you become more insulin sensitive. And so these medications were originally developed for glucose control and then later were approved for type 2 diet or for weight loss, right? Then as they showed benefit primarily as a result of the weight loss for things like cardiovascular, renal, now it's like obstructive sleep disorder, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Like they're being approved for a lot of other indications that are secondary / downstream from obesity and type 2 diabetes. Now, these medications have been around for quite a long time. I think we're closing in on like 20 years, right? The original form of these, actually it's probably more than 20 years, were initially basically a medication that were DPP4 inhibitors.
Which stands for what?
I think it's maybe dipeptidyl peptidase. I'll have to confirm that. It's been so long since I've looked it up, and it's just acronym soup. But that's the enzyme in your body that breaks down the natural production of GLP-1s, right? So when we eat certain types of foods, we produce GLP-1, and these enzyme inhibitors helped us maintain levels of GLP-1 above like normal for a while. And then they actually found ways to make the actual GLP-1 itself. Started with things like exenatide, and now we're in like the 4th, 5th, 10th, I don't know exactly what generation of these medications we are, but they're a lot more effective now.
So to recap, these medications increase insulin sensitivity, they slow gastric emptying, and they reduce your appetite, therefore lower calorie intake, therefore weight loss, right? So they essentially turn down the volume on hunger and they help the body better handle blood sugar. Fair to say? Okay.
Yes.
And these medications were not developed for this specific purpose, but because
for
of
the
what
purpose
they do,
of weight loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But because of what they do, they are a good weight loss tool and they have been effective. And I think,
and I would have to go look at the data, but I would guess they're being prescribed more for weight loss than they are glucose control now.
that would be my guess too. It seems that way. I don't have any data to back that up, but certainly that is the vibe that I think we get from people now when people talk about it. So that's the quick refresher on GLP-1s. Let's talk about what's been happening since the last time we covered this.
Yeah.
Demand, and again, I don't have any data. I'm sure we could look it up, but I know demand has exploded. My guess is it probably hasn't come down. I know there were shortages at one point. There might still be shortages, right? There's off-label prescribing, like people without diabetes, obviously the ones that are using it for weight loss. When I say it has exploded, that's kind of where it's come from.
Yeah.
I also think the FDA is, from what I understand, expanding their approval for it. So like heart disease protection,
Yeah.
so there are like other things to this. And I think, and I believe insurance companies are kind of expanding on what they allow. But so there's been a lot going on. What do you know about, like, what do you know about this since the last time we talked? What's the landscape look like and how has it shifted? Let's say medically and socially.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is an area that I would say I don't have a ton of like intimate knowledge in because I'm not prescribing and I'm not dealing with insurance. I've got a colleague, maybe we'll bring him on the show and he can kind of walk us through some of that stuff. But I mean, basically what we're seeing, and this is just my high level understanding, is, let's see, where do I start? There's obviously the indication of uses are expanding, right? So it initially went from just people with type 2 diabetes to now it's like, hey, BMI over a certain thing plus any comorbidities. There's cardiovascular approval, there's renal approval, there's, I think, obstructive sleep disorders, either now approved or about to get approved. I think non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is now called non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, just a different name for the same thing. And so we're seeing the expansion of these being approved for different indications, right? Indications of use. That basically opens up the market for that. What we're also seeing is the use of compounding pharmacies to make these has gone up pretty substantially. And then there's still the battle of cost, availability, and then what happens as these medications, continue to evolve to the new versions, right? Like there's the older versions that people don't use as much. Those are a little bit cheaper and more available. And then there's the brand new ones that are a little bit more expensive and a little bit less available. So we're kind of in this window of all the new medications that are coming out, and we can talk about some of the advances of those that have occurred. But there's a lot of different things that are going on.
So what do we know about the safety of the medications? There's been enough time to where we have some data on short-term safety, right? I think there are still some gaps on very long-term outcomes that we probably still aren't quite sure about, but like what does the data tell us on short-term safety?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting question. It feels like you're going to get different answers depending on who you ask, right? And I'm going to try to answer this question in the most like intellectually honest way that I can. So in terms of short-term side effects / adverse events, which are two different things in the medical literature, here's what we see. When people immediately start these medications, there's generally a panel of side effects that occur in about half of people, probably 30 to 50%. Let's just say it's that. And they're primarily related to like GI, right? So it's nausea, constipation, and or diarrhea, depending on what's going on with your GI tract. You can get like, what's the best word to describe it? Like if you're just not digesting food, it's like you just don't feel great. You'll also get things like some people experience dizziness, vomiting, things like that. So mostly like GI issues. That's about 30 to 50% of people. Within a few weeks to a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, most of those end up subsiding.
Okay.
There's also a very small percentage of people who experience like adverse events, right? They have, gastroparesis. There's some larger complications, etc. It's a very small percentage of people, but it does exist, right? It occurs at a rate above placebo, so it is there. There's also some very rare side effects / adverse events that are coming out. Like there's some lawsuits around blindness, etc. I feel like a lot of that's still like just trying to be sorted out of like what's causing it, how is this happening. So
yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't aware of the. I don't know if I heard the blindness. Do we know if that's actually from the medication? Is there a merit to that claim?
I honestly haven't done a huge amount of research into it, other than like I've just seen the lawsuits that have been filed, and
yeah.
But so there is like a small percentage of people that have relatively meaningful adverse events that occur that are serious. A large percentage of people have mild to moderate side effects that subside. And so safety, in terms of like understanding these medications, realize they don't come with no risk.
Mm-hmm.
They usually come with some level of discomfort early. And that the longer term risks are more associated with how these medications work specifically. So for example, long-term use is going to have appetite suppressive effects, and if you don't engage in exercise and are not intentional, you're going to experience accelerated sarcopenia and accelerated osteopenia and porosis, right? If you're eating very low calorie and you're losing weight for long periods of time and you sustain that and you're not exercising and eating adequate protein, you're going to have accelerated muscle loss and accelerated loss of bone density.
Yeah. So that's probably so long term, that seems to be the main concern. And are these like how long are people generally staying on these? Do we know?
So I think that's that's a good question.
Obviously, it varies. It obviously varies on
Yeah,
how much what your goals are. I
it
get that,
varies
but
substantially by person. Doses change over time.
Mhm.
As we get newer medications, that's going to change. I mean, I think the average. This is just my assumption based on the literature of what I see, plus the acknowledgement that there's recency bias. I think like 80% of all GLP-1 medications that have ever been prescribed have been prescribed in the last 18 to 24 months. Like I think that's probably roughly what the number is. So I think the average like time that people are using it is somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 24 months for their initial use. And
Gotcha.
then
Yeah.
a lot of people come back and end up using them again later.
Well, so now one of the things that I want to make sure that we cover in this episode is, and it always like I don't, for the record, anybody listening, this is not meant to make these GLP-1s sound like they're a bad thing or a negative at all. There are just side effects to consider, right? And I want to make sure that this episode isn't painting it like in a negative light because there are a lot of benefits and positive things to these types of medications. It can be a great tool, but I think it's important to cover, some of the risks and just be aware of it. But when people come off of these medications, we probably have data on what does the rebound look like, are what are people's success rates after the medication? What can
Yeah.
we what do you know about that?
So I think the best way to describe it is we have data on these medications, their discontinued use, and it's fair. We have a large amount of data, so we know fairly well what happens, right? If you look at effectively what happens is if people are on these medications for a year and a half, and they just stop taking them, and there's no additional lifestyle support, about 80% of the weight comes back in about a year. That's just kind of roughly what it looks like. And you can go look
80%
at all
within a
the
year. Okay.
trials. I mean, that's pretty much what the data looks like. And I can cite a bunch of papers, and
Sure.
like I'm just looking at one right now. But that is what we see, right? But there is some important caveats there, right? We know that the rate of weight regain is not inherently unique to these medications. This is everything we have seen in the weight loss literature from medications from the dawn of weight loss medications, right?
Mm-hmm.
The graph is identical to every other weight loss medication. It's important to note that the graph is also identical to every weight loss trial that has used dietary intervention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the result of when you have a substantial change in behavior and then remove the intervention, regardless of what it is, the same thing happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look in the literature and you see whenever these are added, whenever you add exercise and dietary interventions, so lifestyle interventions on top of these medications, and they have continued support after utilization, the weight regain is substantially lower. Right. So engaging in lifestyle and habit modification substantially improves the long-term efficacy of these medications. We know that I don't want to say for a fact, but like it's very clear in the data, right? And so that's what I think is incredibly important.
Yeah. That is, well, we can maybe come back and talk about this a little bit later, but I did want to get into the habits and behaviors that are necessary to make sure that you have success for life after these medications. And, it's about your habits and behaviors and some things that you can do to make sure that you sustain that. We'll come back to that. I do think it's important to cover. But what I wanted to ask you, and if you don't know the answer, it's okay. I don't expect you to know the answer here, but what do we think is the future of these medications? Like, do you think, I mean, could we see more oral versions? Could we see, like, will these become as common as statins, for example, like where they are routine prescriptions for prevention, right? Like, where do you think this is
Yeah.
all going?
Um, but I can tell you what I see in the pharmaceutical roadmap for development, and maybe
Yeah,
that'll
because
paint a picture. So,
I'm curious.
yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of like whack-a-mole slash Brave New World slash let's just try to treat everything with a pill approach from the pharma side. So basically what's happening is these medications started out as only injectables, right? Now, obviously, that's a fairly large barrier to entry for a lot of people. A lot of people are just like, I don't want to inject myself every day, every week, every month. Like, I just don't want to do it, right? So they've developed oral. They're continuing to develop better, more effective oral routes of delivery. So that'll make them easier to get people to take them, right? They're also increasing the targets that these medications hit. So, for example, the original medications, specifically the GLP-1s, not the DPP-4s, they started out as a single agonist, right? So they specifically just targeted the GLP-1 receptor, right? Then they came out with dual agonist drugs, which is GLP-1 and GIP. So I think GIP is gastroinhibitory peptide. No, sorry, glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide. It's such an alphabet soup. But basically, the GIP portion of the drug, so the dual agonist, it enhances the effect of insulin. So it makes the GLP-1 portion of it more effective, right? So that was the dual, we call it dual agonist medications. Then there was triple agonist medications, right? And this is what like tirzepatide, retatrutide, like those ones are the triple agonists. So that also tackles the first two plus glucagon, right? So
And does this essentially mean these medications are stronger and more effective than the previous iterations?
yes,
Okay.
right? So now what they're working on is a quad agonist, which has IGF-1 activation in it to try to reduce the amount of muscle loss. Right? So it's like, oh, okay, well, let's just keep adding targets to this class of medication to try to offset all of the side effects that occur along with long-term use, right?
Yeah,
so we're basically kind of walking into this polypharmacy in a single pill to manage everything, right? That's the direction that medications are going. We're trying to treat more with a single one. We're trying to lower the barrier to entry. And then, there's going to be a lot of governmental pressure and subsidies to try to lower the cost of these medications. And here's where I think one of the important discussions comes from. And I don't know the answer to this, but when we talk about the long-term view of these medications, there's a very complex discussion around what is the cost of these medications? What is the potential harm of widespread use of these medications? But what is the widespread long-term benefit, right? If we know that these medications reduce cardiovascular complications, renal complications, retinal complications, hepatic complications, like do we lower the overall healthcare burden on the healthcare system by having widespread use of these? Like, what is the cost benefit analysis across the board? And then you factor in like, okay, how do we factor in personal autonomy, personal responsibility? Like it's all a very complicated discussion, but this is a little bit of the path that we're walking down as society of like, we don't really have a choice. And we can actually see this in the data. Like if you look at, obviously this is a little bit, I'll give you the numbers and I'll give you a little bit of context. So in 2018, we spent $13.66 billion in the U.S. I'm pretty sure this is just the U.S. Is this U.S.? Yes, in the U.S., $13.66 billion on GLP-1 medications.
In when?
2018.
2018. Okay. Dang.
13.1, so like 90+% was for type 2 diabetes indications, right? 500 million was for type 2 for obesity. Fast forward to 2023,
Holy cow.
71.66 billion, right?
Wow.
So we're just continuing to expand the
Invest
use of
in it.
these. And more of the current like modern generation medications are the ones being used. So we have an expanded use for type 2 diabetes. We have an expanded use for obesity, right? So the use for type 2 diabetes went up 5-fold. The indications for obesity and the cost went up 12-fold, right? Now, the newer generations of medications are substantially more expensive, right? You have to do all the R&D, so you have to pay all that money up front. Then you have to like amortize that in the back end. So those medications are going to be more expensive when they first come out. Just from the R&D perspective, you have these triple quad agonists, so they're more expensive to manufacture than the original ones. So it's just plus inflationary costs. Like, so all of those things are adding into this, but like that's a huge jump in medication costs. And it's not like these are replacing other expensive medications.
Yeah.
Right? They are an additional cost. Now, maybe people are spending a little bit less on metformin or a little bit less on insulin. Generally, they're not replacing it because like they're just slightly different indications and used differently. But this is not like a replacement cost; it's an additive cost.
So do we think? Oh, go ahead.
No, you're good.
Well, my question was going to be, so with all of this said, and let me just actually, we're getting some comments here. Let's see. Yes, Aaron, this will be visible later. We do record these. We upload these on our YouTube channel, and then this will be also on our other podcasts, so you can listen to it really at any time. So yes, it'll be on there. Spotify, you're good. But what I was going to ask was, is there, so for people that are thinking, they've been listening to this episode, they've looked into this, and they're thinking, should I get on GLP-1s? I'm trying to figure out if like I'm a good candidate. Is there criteria that we should go by, that we should consider when considering if I should get on this or not, right? Like, obviously this is approved for someone who's obese, like classified as medically obese, type 2 diabetics, and certain comorbidities. Like, we know that. But, is it like, should, is some of the criteria, like maybe if I'm someone who's I just have mild weight loss concerns and I'm just looking for a quick fix, not saying that any of our viewers are doing that, but just like if I'm looking for something quick, does that mean like maybe I shouldn't do this? Is it as simple as saying if you're not ready for long-term change, these aren't for you, right? Like, what is the criteria? What are some things we should consider when deciding if we should get on these? Or is it maybe it's as simple as, talk to your doctor? If that's the answer, I mean, then that's the answer. But for people that are wondering, is this for me? What does that thought process look like, do we think?
I think it's so contextual and so personal for everybody, right? I mean, here's my perspective. These are a tool, right? And just like anything else, tools can be very useful or they can be used inappropriately.
Yeah, for sure.
And so one of the things that I think about is, one, does the use of these medications lower your overall risk of something bad happening from your health, right? We know that having a high BMI, every day you wake up with a high BMI, your risk is higher, right? So if these lower that, you lower your risk of a cardiovascular event, cancer, diabetes, etc. So I think in that aspect, if you utilize them and in 3 months you lose 10% of your body weight, or 6 months you lose 10% of your body weight, well, now you've substantially reduced every day you wake up, your risk accumulation is lower, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an important point. Two, how do you think about these in the use of like, okay, what are the potential side effects? What is the risk of an adverse event or a serious adverse event? How do you kind of personally, manage that risk, right? Um, and then it's okay, how do I think about these in terms of short-term use versus long-term use? So I think everybody should take this as a personal decision, right? I think there's a lot of people who would really benefit from these. I think there's sometimes people shouldn't be taking them, right? I think and even in those people who I think maybe, hey, this is probably not the best idea, I think it's still your choice, right? And is the risk reward for you, does it make sense? Right? It's the same thing as like, think about it like investing, right? There's some people who, let's say they've got 10 grand to their name. Some people are going to keep 9 grand in their checking account to just live and put 1,000 in the crypto. Some people are going to take $9,990 of it and keep 10 in their personal account and invest in a crypto account, like whatever it is, right? So it's everybody's choice in how they make choices is very different. And I think from our perspective as coaches is how do we best support you regardless of whether you decide to take them or not, right?
For sure.
I mean,
and we'll get in
from our perspective, to be totally honest, from our perspective, I mean, these make our job easier and more effective, right? If we can reduce some of the battles that our clients have to have, and we can focus on, okay, well, now that we've taken care of some of this stuff, whether it's through medication or whatever, like if we can focus on, okay, now that you're feeling better and you're moving better, let's make sure you can, let's really exercise, let's engage. Hey, here's like, while your brain isn't craving all of these things, let's work on, okay, here's menus, here's things you can build, here's how you can shop. Like, it's just a piece of the puzzle. I don't think it's,
for sure.
It's not good. It's not bad. There's no moral judgment on it. It's like, okay, these are the things on the ground. This is the facts of the case.
Yeah, definitely. Before we get into that, because we'll kind of dive more into that piece, we had an interesting comment here. Thought I'd show this. There we go. Talking about these GLP-1s, it is actually helping people significantly lower insulin needs and even get off insulin. So
yeah, eventually, as long as their body weight goes down and it doesn't come back up, right?
Yeah, so that's what
it's not it's not a true replacement cost for everybody all the time.
But now, correct me if I'm wrong. This is, when that happens, it's not. It's because of the result of taking the medication. When you have a lower body mass, you become more insulin sensitive, and you can sort of.
Yeah, it's also the direct effect of the medications causing your body to release more insulin
to be right. Okay, right.
Depending on which one you're using, enhances the effect of whatever insulin is in your body. So it's like if somebody's taking liraglutide, which is one of the initial ones, or let's just say exenatide. Actually, that's probably a better example. If somebody's taking exenatide, they may be able to lower their insulin use a little bit initially, but not a huge amount. Now, as they lose body weight and it's a high enough dose or whatever, maybe they can come off it completely.
Does this also mean that they're able to come off insulin and the GLP-1 medication?
It's also individualized, right?
Okay.
So, let me just kind of finish.
It's not impossible.
I'll go back and finish kind of my train of thought there. So, let's say you take one of these early single agonists, like maybe it helps you reduce some of your basal and mealtime insulin use. Maybe it's not as high enough dosage. Like it'll depend. It's not like everybody has this effect. Now, if we use some of the like more modern medications, you're getting a pretty large improvement in insulin secretion. You're getting an improvement in insulin sensitivity. You're getting a reduction in hepatic glucose output. So you probably are lowering some of your insulin use immediately, right? But it's not like across the board, everyone who goes on these immediately stops taking any of their other medications. In some cases it is, but not for everybody across the board, right?
So there's a lot of positive there are a lot of positive aspects to GLP-1s. And then going back to what I said earlier is we kind of started the episode talking about some of the, side effects, and that sort of paints like a negative picture, like to scare people away. And that is not the intention. There are a lot of positives about this. They're clinically proven to be effective. There are health benefits beyond just the weight loss. We talked about it reduces your risk of cardiovascular events when your weight goes down. You see improvements in blood pressure, cholesterol, inflammation markers. So there are positives to these medications, and like we talked about, and like Brad said, they're a tool, and they're in and of themselves they're neutral, right? It's like it's what you do around them that sort of matters more, right? And so I want to dive into a little bit about, we talked about what I think the stat was after a year. So you get off GLP-1s, and within a year, people on average gain about 80% of the weight back, right? We don't want that to happen. And so it comes down to what you had mentioned, which was when you remove the thing that made you lose the weight in the first place and you change nothing else, the weight comes back on. So how do we avoid that from happening? Well, we have to change our habits and behaviors, right? And so I wanted to talk about what do we, Macros Inc. and our coaches and our staff and everyone here, what do we think of these GLP-1s, and then how do we work with people that are on these GLP-1 medications so that you don't have that weight gain rebound after you're off? And I think speaking to that a little bit not only gives people insight into what we do, but also just a general idea, even if you don't end up getting a coach, should give you a general idea of the things that you might want to start doing so that this doesn't happen to you if you're doing this solo, right? So the way I think of it is like you are, if you have a coach, you're learning, we can like basically help you learn the skills for life after medication, like maintenance strategies, meal planning. You talked about the emotional regulation around food. Those things are very important. There's also environment modification that we can help you with, and setting up your environment to be conducive to the person you are after you've lost the weight. So it's a lot of behavior and habit change along the way that sets you up for long term. We essentially teach people how to make good food choices, how to structure your meals, how to structure your day, and just how to develop routines that that actually stick. But also coaches, I think we do a really good job of just like we normalize that process. We normalize helping you reduce your food anxiety. We keep you focused on the bigger picture, and we just cover a lot. But so what do we think, like from your perspective, Brad, what when it comes to, say I'm a client that wants to come work with a coach, I'm on GLP-1s, what is my journey going to look like? Right? You're kind of the head of the coaching department. So what does that look like if you're a client who's on this looking for help from a coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's every client has different bottlenecks in their journey, right? For some people, it's they really struggle with making good food choices when food's present, right? For some people, it's their life is so chaotic, pre-planning and like building structure in their life is their big hurdle. For other people, it's the weekends, etc. And so I think what clients who utilize these medications who come into our coaching program do, this helps us address those things with less friction, right? Like if you're somebody who really struggles with, hey, and I was thinking about this morning because my wife is obsessed with those little mini cinnamon rolls you can buy from the store. So she she buys them probably like, I don't know.
I remember having those out at your place in in Coeur d'Alene, yeah.
Like once a month, right? And so they're sitting on the counter and like I haven't had a single one. Like I just walk by them every day and there's just like there's not really any craving, there's no emotional response, etc. Right? And so I think what happens is like let's say a client comes in and normally when they're walking through their kitchen and they see them, like they get this thing in their brain where it's like, oh, I need to have one, right? if these medications help reduce that craving, well, now you can develop the habit of, for a month, I have walked through my kitchen and I have seen these things and I haven't wanted them, so I haven't eaten
Yeah.
them.
Mhm.
You teach your client, like, hey, pay attention to this. Because then you kind of grease that pathway in your brain of like, oh, I can see something and not take action on it.
That's the normal behavior. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you, instead of it just like you not thinking about it and like passively going through your day and it's just an effect of the medications, it's like, okay, now it becomes a part of your intentional thought process and how we actually build behaviors, right? And so like that would be something I would focus on with a client. I'd be like, hey, right now, like while we're going through this and we have this tool that's helping us, let's be really intentional about how we think about this. Like as you walk through your kitchen or as you go out to dinner and you see the dessert on the table, like you don't eat it, like you have shown yourself that you can have the habit pathway of doing that. And so then when we remove this, you've already shown yourself you can do it. So you're kind of building that self-efficacy. So like that is an example of how we would do that, right?
So is it fair to say that if I were to summarize it, like GLP-1s are what's going to take care of the biology, right? And coaching, we're going to take care of the behavior. And you put those two things together, you're not just losing weight, you're learning how to keep it off. I think that's kind of the way I would frame that.
Yeah.
We got another comment here. Let's see.
We have a couple that we can go back and touch base
Yeah.
on too.
This one says, that is what I am most afraid of when thinking about going off the med. So I think she's referring to, the weight regain or the things that happen afterward. And I think that's a common fear people face.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the other side of that too is like people express the same thing about coaching, right? They're like, oh, what am I going to do when I'm not in coaching? I think it's anytime you have a system, a process, a tool, a community support, anything that helps bolster your decision making and you remove it, I think it's scary. And it's not just the medication, it's like anything in your life, right?
Anything, for sure.
And I think that's normal. And I think that's part of the process. Yeah. So I think there was also a question above, and Dylan, I think we probably won't put the questions on the screen just because it like messes up some of our back end stuff we're doing. So
okay, sure. Yeah.
Just for now as we're testing some things. So somebody said, not sure if this was already covered, but can you also talk about microdosing? I've been hearing about this from a lot of friends, and especially in context of women's health / perimenopause. So this is a great question, and this is something that's come up quite a bit. As far as I know, there have been no published trials about microdosing that I have seen that are outside of use for glucose control amongst people with type 2 diabetes, right? I know that the American Diabetes Association did put out a paper in March of this year about how people can utilize, quote, microdoses for helping manage their glucose among there being potential shortages. So if you're using these medications and you can't get, your full like pen reload or whatever, like here's how you could maybe dose it a little bit lower and still get the effects. But in terms of like appetite suppression, weight loss, metabolic control amongst the other indications, there's not good published data. So anything you're hearing online is anecdote, speculation, and just be very careful about like, hey, my friend told me he microdosed, so I'm going to start using it once a week or once a month or just lower doses. Like I would be very wary of that. Now, there are clinical trials in the works exploring this, right? I think there's going to be some very interesting data that comes out of it, but I would wait until those papers are published. Now, maybe you're somebody who's like, risk reward, I'm willing to take it, I'm going to test it on myself, like that's on you. I would say like the trials are currently ongoing. Like for example, here's one, clinicaltrials.gov, NCT 07092605. its effectiveness of microdosed GLP-1 in improving health, quality of life, and longevity measures. It's obviously sponsored by a pharmaceutical company. Take that for what it's worth. I'm looking at the, let's see, what's the participant criteria? You have to be an adult aged 18 to 65. You can be male or female, any ethnicity, BMI of over 20. So these are people who are going to use it for just like general health and longevity and not for weight loss. So like these trials are going to be conducted. So now this is not related to this topic, but sort of related to this topic. So this is a interesting finding or slash note. Exclusion criteria. You can't have, there's a bunch of stuff in here, but one of them is pregnant or breastfeeding individuals, right? One of the criticisms that has often raised in the like health, wellness, medical literature is from like the 70s through mid 2000s, there was often an underrepresentation of women versus men in clinical trials. A lot of it was because you can't get a study approved through an ethics board if you allow for pregnant women, breastfeeding women, and oftentimes women of childbearing age who have any intention of getting pregnant. Because because if you're doing experimental medications, like you don't know what's going on. And so a lot of times it's just like, we can't recruit enough because if we need healthy-ish people between the age of 20 and 40, like that's a large portion of the population, right? Now,
for sure,
there's been changes to how we do things and ethics boards, and so it's actually like over the last 15 years, women are pretty much equally represented in trials now. But I just thought that was an interesting note. Like there are exclusion criteria for a lot of these studies for a reason.
Is there anything else you think you'd want to cover? I think I've covered the main things that I wanted to, but and we've had some good, got some good questions. So thank you guys for the questions in here too. There was one that just, I don't think we've covered this one yet. A friend of mine was just offered them, but the MD said she'd have to be on it for life. She is not diabetic. So that's news to me. I didn't really realize that somebody would say that you have to be on it for life, but maybe that is a thing. I don't know.
So yeah, that brings up a couple interesting points. There's a lot of different perspectives, and I'll just give you the things that I've heard. I think the first most important perspective is you have choice and medical autonomy. You can choose. You can be prescribed something and not take it, right? I could have high blood pressure, be prescribed blood pressure meds, and just not take my meds. Like you have the autonomy to do that, right? That's the first, I think, just fortunately, with the exception of some weird things that have happened in the not too distant past, we have autonomy of the decisions we make medically over our body, right? Which is great. The second thing is there's maybe there's more than two, but there's a couple different perspectives that physicians will often bring to discussions like this. So one of the things that you mentioned is like, hey, this woman's physician said this is a lifetime medication. That perspective is often used from the same perspective of like, oh, if you have high blood pressure, you'll be on blood pressure medication for life, right? Hey, you may be on antidepressants for life. Hey, you may be on they're like, hey, if other medications are for life, why would weight loss medications be any different? That's often the perspective. And I think the other perspective is there's two other perspectives. One is medications should always be evaluated at a given point in time, right? Maybe you can go off the blood pressure meds. Like maybe you've managed the stress and you've managed the body weight and you don't have to use them, right? Maybe you have some other thing that's controlling your hypertension that you have no control over and you have to be on it for life. Maybe not. It's just like it's always context dependent, right? And then the third thing is, well, maybe it's you use it for a while, you don't use it for a while, and you use it for a while again, right? It's sort of like I mean, calorie restriction is the same thing. You don't have to be in a calorie deficit your whole life, but there may be periods where you have to be in it and periods where you're not, and then periods where you use it again, right?
For sure.
Like in the modern world, I don't think it's reasonable for anybody to be like, hey, my body weight's going to stay exactly at maintenance weight every year for the rest of my life for the next 70 years. No, there's probably like, oh, hey, like the last 6 months of work was super hectic. I travel a lot. I didn't have time to plan my food. My exercise wasn't great. So my weight went up 10 pounds. Like I'm probably going to have to lower my calorie intake and increase my energy expenditure to get my weight back to where I'd like it to be. Like these intermittent uses. And so I think it's just, remember, you have all of those perspectives that I think are valid.
Yep. I think that's well said.
It's made up.
Anything
It's
else?
Fugazi.
Anything else you feel like we should cover? I think we covered a lot. I feel pretty good about the information we give out. People seem to have found it helpful. So once again, thank you to everyone who is watching and who has watched. But yeah, I mean, if
And
you
who
think there's
bared
anything
with
else-
us through our cold open.
You didn't like that one, huh?
I'm just giving you a hard time.
I thought it was funny, and that's all that matters. I'm here to entertain myself, not you.
That's probably the most Family Guy I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. I used to watch it quite a bit. I don't really anymore, but yeah. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up at this point. And yeah, I mean, next week. Oh, and I should say, for anybody watching, go look at my post in the Facebook group from yesterday where I asked, what topics would you guys like to see us do? We've done a lot. We've been doing this. This is episode number 59. So we've been doing this for a while. We've covered a lot of topics, but if you have ideas on topics that you'd like to see us cover that we haven't potentially covered already, drop a comment on my post, and we could potentially add it to the list. Otherwise, that's all I got. So thank you again, all of you for tuning in. Brad, any final words for our wonderful audience?
If you are interested in learning more about nutrition and chronic disease, that is a major chapter in our course.
Yes.
That is coming out October 18th. Oh, that just fell. Let me see. I'll pull up the chapter that it's in, actually. I have way too many pages in here. I'm sorry, guys. I like to
When is... Oh, yeah.
See?
No.
Look, here's the chapter. It is titled Nutrition and Chronic Disease. I have a funny story about this book, by the way. I'll have to tell you maybe offline.
Yeah. Jay said he's also coming out with a coloring book that he's designing for people, so he's really excited to throw that one out there.
So for those of you who are interested in diabetes, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here on it. It's very interesting. I mean, I think it's interesting because I wrote it, but you guys can do a deep dive.
But also
October 18th, 8 a.m. Pacific time. And then I'm going to take a nap after that because I've been working on this for 2 years and it's just taken up every second of free time I've had.
This is actually wrapping up to be a good time for the episode to end, because I think I just got a call from the guy who's supposed to come over and fix our microwave. My daughter broke our microwave the other day. I don't know how, but she put something in the microwave and all I saw were sparks going, and then it wouldn't start. And they're like, yeah, you're either going to need a new one or we're going to have to replace the part. So we'll come take a look at it. So just hopefully I don't have to buy a brand new microwave today, but we'll see.
It's crazy how expensive microwaves are.
$400 is the one that would cost to replace ours. I'm like, I don't
Tell your
want to spend
kid
that
that
right now.
she's never microwaving food again.
Or
It's
it's
a lot
just
of
going to come
lawn
out
mowing
of,
she's got to do.
I'm going to say it's going to come out of her piggy bank and her allowance. So, all right. Thank you all. I've said that a million times, but I genuinely mean it. So thank you for tuning in, and we will be back next week. Until then, adios. Go see my post. Comment on what you want to see us talk about. We're out of here.